So to get this started, before we dive into the questions, I want to give you a couple of minutes just to introduce yourself and give a little bit about your background.
Okay, sure. Hi, my name is Janis Holt, and I am a lifelong Southeast Texas resident. I have lived in Silsbee, which is in Hardin County, since 1993, so almost 30 years. And I am a former school teacher. My husband and I own our own business. I quit teaching to work with him in our business. We do indoor air purification, so we kill COVID and amongst other things. And I also am a school board member, and I'm serving as president of the Silsbee ISD School Board currently. And I have 5 grandkids and 4 kids, 5 grandkids, and I love to quilt when I have time, but there is no time for that now. So anyway, that's just a little brief background.
Mm-hmm. So then I want to start with education, considering your background as a school board member and a teacher. What are some of the biggest issues you see currently with the public education system in Texas, and how would you address them?
Sure. Right now, the 2 things that concern me the most are the way that with COVID, the quality of education that was missed for a lot of our kids. I'm very, very concerned that that we have really done a disservice to our children over the last 2 years. This past year has been better in Texas anyway, but the school year before that, the end of the year prior, and then all of 2020, I'm just very concerned that we are not going to be able to get the kids caught up effectively and efficiently. And so we need to continue to address that and continue to give resources to our school districts in order to be able to try to mediate that the best way that we can, considering the circumstances. The second thing that I am concerned about is the introduction of critical race theory in our school districts. It has been said by some in this race that critical race theory doesn't even exist in the state of Texas, but it does. I've seen it firsthand. I've heard of it from all across the state of Texas. And so even though we have had legislation passed to not teach critical race theory, I know that it can be introduced in a lot of ways besides curriculum. And so we have to make sure that there are some penalties, some bite to a to a penalty if a teacher is actually trying to introduce that through just their slant on education, on a particular subject. And it doesn't have to be history. It can come across in all genres of education. And so I'm very concerned about that. And we have to make sure that we are securing our children's education in the best way possible.
Mm-hmm. What about funding for school districts? Now, this is kind of 2-pronged because that leads into property taxes as well. How do you feel about the way that public education is currently funded, and what changes would you make?
Sure. Public education has always been funded by the government. I mean, that's the way it was set up early on. And it's important to be funded by the government. As a public school trustee, I understand that. And so we have to make sure that the source of the funding is something that's going to be consistent. And you're right, it kind of crosses over into property taxes. And so that's a big deal right now too, as well, is we have to actually secure our homeowners and their finances too, because it's just getting out of control. So that answer is kind of 2-pronged also, because on one hand you have the appraisal districts, and then you have the funding entities, whether it be the school districts or your county governments, your local governments who set those rates. And so we have to really look into that and make sure that we do give relief to these property owners. My personal taxes went up. The appraisal of my home, our property, went way up. It just jumped really high in one school year. And so obviously we can't just stop property taxes. There's got to be a system a graduated system where we get it to where we are funded by a different source, whether that be a consumption tax or a flat tax. That would be something that once I'm in the legislature that we will have conversations about. But I do believe that we do need to change that funding source in order to make it a little more fair, spread that out a little more broadly so that we can continue to fund our public schools, but have it in a way that is more fair and equitable across the state of Texas.
Now, staying on property taxes, while the school districts tend to take up a large portion of the tax rate itself, there is also issues of appraisals in comparison to the tax rate. What kind of controls do you think there should be on appraisals with relation to the tax rate, and how would you help?
Sure. You know, a lot of people don't really know how the appraisal district operates, how it is formed. You know, there are employees, and then there's people who are put onto those appraisal boards. Now, those people are actually selected by school districts and the local county governments to go sit on those appraisal boards. But other than that, you know, the people who put those people on the entities who put the people on the appraisal boards don't really have any kind of control over it once they're appointed to that board. And so I believe that we must have some more regulations on those appraisal boards. Now, having said that, if we move to a consumption tax or a, you know, some kind of a flat tax, well, then obviously the appraisal boards won't be necessary. So, but then you've got all these people that we have to think about that may, you know, lose their jobs. So we have to figure out all of that to make sure that we, you know, we don't just kick people out of their jobs, but we have to have some sort of oversight on these appraisal boards. I serve on the State Commission on Judicial Conduct. I was appointed by Governor Abbott in 2019 to that commission. And on that commission, we make rulings, but we are also governed by the Supreme Court, and we also are by the Texas legislature has regulations for that commission. And so we have to make sure that, you know, we do the same for our appraisal boards. I believe that we need to have oversight. They need to have some sort of reckoning as to what is the mechanism for how they're determining the property values. We need to know what that is, let it be a little more transparent so that the property owners and the general public do have some access to that and know that it is not some, you know, non-regulated type of decision-making going on.
Now, a little more locally, an issue that has come up recently is the proposed placement of a landfill in San Jacinto County, bordering Montgomery County.
Yes.
There's been strong opposition to that. What would you do to help? How would you address that situation?
Sure, and I just recently learned of this issue also, and so I've been doing a little bit of research. I need to do more. I mean, I just, like in the last 2 or 3 days, I found out about this. So forgive my ignorance on it at some point, but you know, it appears to be that this landfill is sitting right up next to a floodplain and very close to our water sources. And so obviously with the weather that we have, with hurricanes, with our rain events, I think about Harvey, but it's not just hurricane events. It's also just, you know, our normal rain events. It does not make sense to me that we're going to put this landfill in a position where if we have flooding, that this is going, I mean, it's going to go into our water table anyway, the runoff from a landfill of this size, but it's also going to go downstream, and it's going to, you know, go into the San Jacinto River, on down into Harris County, into Lake Houston, and all down in that direction. So we have to open this back up. It seems like it's just kind of creeped up, and there hasn't been public knowledge as much as it should. And so I believe that we need to have another hearing. Let's open this up so we can have some more public input, because there needs to be a place where, you know, where we can move that landfill. San Jacinto County is a large county, so there are a lot of places where it's not in the population. I believe this current location is right next to some farmland, people who provide produce and all that for the community. And so we need to make sure that we move that to a different area so that we can, we can still have the landfill. We need them. That's one of those necessary evils. But I heard, when I was doing some research, I heard that it's going to be like 30 feet, 30 something feet, 32, 33 feet deep, but that it also has the capacity of being 100 and something feet high. And I just start thinking about that and looking at your trees and all of that. I mean, that's really tall. So to have that, if I were a homeowner and I was right, abutted right up next to that, I think I might have some issues with that. I mean, but it can't just be, unfortunately, with TCEQ, it cannot just be, well, it's smelly. There has to be something that's breaching our air quality or our water quality, something like that. And I can't imagine how this would not. And so, I'm going to be very active in trying to find out more information about this because we need to, make sure that that's in a better location, still conserve the community, but it just needs to be moved. And so we have to go through the steps to make sure that the public has more information about it and that we make that happen.
Now, like you mentioned earlier, this area is known for having a lot of major flooding events, as well as being prone to hurricanes, which can cause another version of a major flooding event. When it comes to flooding, a lot of issue is derived from developing standards and the retention ponds, detention ponds. What would you just do to set standards which would ensure that new developments did not cause additional flooding? And what else, how would you work with say the state to help clear flooding issues?
Sure. And I mean, we just had in Liberty County in Plum Grove, just recently, like 2 weeks ago, we had a huge flooding issue, there, and that was just a rain issue. And so I went down there and looked around, and I talked to some of the residents there, and this issue there in this particular subdivision has happened many times. And so their complaint was that the developer there does not and has not followed those the rules completely with the retention ponds and those kinds of things. And so as with anything where it affects life, it affects livestock, it affects that kind of thing and property, then we have to make sure that the things that are in place currently in legislation, it's kind of twofold. We need to make sure that they are being enforced on the local level. We have to make sure that an official, and I'm not accusing anyone of anything, so this is kind of generic, but we have to make sure that an official in the local government is not turning a blind eye to that in order to just let things go, so you have to make sure of that enforcement. And then secondly, you have to make sure that the regulations stay up to date with the times, and that we are looking at the population. Montgomery County is like the fastest growing county, in the state of Texas. Liberty County, especially the west side, in this Plum Grove area, Cleveland, is one of the fastest growing areas. And I think that has to do with being attached to Montgomery County, just there to the west. And so, we have to look at all of these factors, and, the size of the roads, the traffic on the roads. Some of these roads were not designed for this much traffic. And so all of these things go together. And so that's what needs to be updated in our legislation to make sure we're staying up to date on all of these regulations, and then the enforcement of the regulations on the backside to protect property, to protect life, whether it be animal, livestock life, or actually human life.
Now I want to go into mobility as well, because Montgomery County, Liberty County, San Jacinto County, these are all growing and expanding areas. So how would you work with TxDOT and the local county governments to ensure the mobility needs are met, not just currently, but in the future?
Sure, and I think that has to do with doing road surveys, getting out, making sure that, sometimes when you're in the legislature, I think, you're there advocating for your district. And so I think that comes with conversation, making those initial contacts, getting those relationships built, and then making sure that they are looking at our areas. And then if, for instance, cut and shoot. We look at cut and shoot. If you've driven through that area lately, that, from there all the way into Conroe, down 105, that area has expanded and has grown so much. You could just fly right through there, coming from Cleveland to Conroe, but you can't do that anymore. And so studies need to be made to see what those traffic flows are. What are the high traffic times, and what specific areas? How can we manage that to, have bypasses or things like that? And so, but then you get into property also, and, people's personal property. And so we want to make sure that, that those things are protected too as well. So you have to look at it it's almost like looking at it from a helicopter, an eagle eye version of it, and saying, how can we make all of this work in order to increase the flow of traffic? One of the big concerns that I think of too is emergency traffic, trying to get people through for emergency services, whether it's ambulance, fire, police, whatever it is, so that all plays into it as well. And so when you look at all of these entities, then you can come up with a plan, but it starts with having TxDOT and the engineers out there looking at the situation, monitoring it, getting their surveys so that we can make the changes that we need to move forward in the future.
Mm-hmm. Now, during the pandemic, at the height of 2020, whenever issues were there were some legislators who called for the governor to call a special session so the legislatures could come in and make decisions regarding the statewide handling of the pandemic. Would you have supported that? And how did you feel about the general response overall?
Sure, I absolutely would support that, because I was calling for it myself. Here, in my area, that was the general consensus, because, we've never had anything like this before, not only district-wide, statewide, nationwide, and worldwide. And so, there were a lot of unknowns. We weren't ready for an emergency situation that was going to go beyond 2 weeks, a month, 6 weeks. We weren't ready for that. And so I would have actually, supported that call, because what it needed to be was, there needs to be some timeframes in there, is how I would propose that we adjust it. Yes, our governor is in place to make those decisions as our chief executive in our state. But after a certain time frame, I believe what they talked about was setting up a committee that would be made up of lieutenant governors, secretary of state, members of the Senate, and members of the House that were in those key chairs of those key committees. And that was a good start to that, because then that got it a little closer to the citizen. But I would have called for even further. So if they waited 30 days and we didn't have a resolution of the emergency, whatever that is, in this case, COVID, that committee could be called in. But I would call for then another 30 days, if that pandemic was still going on, then we call the whole legislature in. Let's call the whole House, let's call the whole Senate in, and let's make this happen. After 60 days, we were able to figure out how we could function safely. And so, so we could have done that, and I would have wholly supported that, because we have to remember that for the average citizen, for any citizen, not the average citizen, for all citizens, the closest representative to them is that state legislator. And so that representation needs to be in on those emergency decisions after a certain amount of time, if not immediately. So that's what the legislation I would have proposed. I believe that the feeling of most Texans was that the government went a little too far. Now, I'm one who tends to give a little grace in situations like this, because I know that, you know, they're in a situation where they're facing the unknown. And so they were making decisions the best way that they could. But I believe that a way to have alleviated that pressure on our governor would have been to have our legislature in, you know, making sure that those people closest to the citizen, to me, in this case, back in 2020, had my ear. You know, they had their, you know, they knew that I was able to communicate with them, me and others, you know, who care about our district and what the situation is in our district. And so I think that could have been alleviated. So as we move forward in the next legislative session, that is something that I'm wanting to push forward to as well. You know, so that we go through something like this again, where it's an extended amount of time, whether it's a pandemic or some other natural disaster, then we have a mechanism in place where our local closest representative will be the one that can make decisions for me in my district.
I wanted to circle back to education real quick, because something you've talked about on your website is promoting patriotism within the education system. Could you expound on that?
Sure, absolutely. I'm a daughter of a World War II veteran. So from a very early age, patriotism was instilled in me. And so I've grown up that way, respecting our flag, respecting our veterans, respecting our government, and respecting the fact that our country was founded on these Judeo-Christian values. And so all of that is what is ingrained in me since I was a young girl. And so I have always looked for ways to promote Americanism. In fact, I was able to be the Americanism chair for the Texas Federation of Republican Women several years ago. And so it was very it's a very big passion for me to make sure that our children know that our country was founded on values that promote American exceptionalism, that we, you know, our veterans, you know, they went to war from our very first, you know, from the American Revolution all the way up to our Gulf Wars and beyond, you know, that they have put their life on the line to protect those values that we all hold dear. And so if they're not being taught that, you know, it's not just standing up and putting our hand over our heart, there's meaning behind that, you know, of what that pledge stands for. And so if we don't educate our children to that, well, then we're going to raise, excuse me, we're going to raise a generation that does not understand what my dad did back in the 40s, in the 1940s. He did, you know, of what he did as a 20-year-old man, you know, so we have to make sure that that is promoted. And that's why I believe in teaching, making sure that we're teaching our American history through that lens. And that kind of goes with that critical race theory. It's not that lens of pitting each other against, you know, pitting each of us against each other, but that, you know, we had those flaws in our early history, and that we are always trying to move beyond those and become a more united nation and not a divided nation, because we are the United States of America. And so we have to, I mean, we just celebrated Martin Luther King Day yesterday. You know, those values that he promoted, even of, you know, of judging people on their character and not on the color of their skin. We have to always remember that and teach that to our children. We're not born colorblind. You know, I mean, we are born colorblind. We have, you know, we are developed as we grow, we develop those where we look at people differently. And if that is fostered, then it will grow, you know, in a negative way. And we don't need that. You know, I don't remember growing up that way. You know, I didn't see it that way. When I taught school, I didn't see the differences in the colors. They were kids and they all deserved, you know, to have the same education. And so we have to make sure that that continues to go on. And I think that's what Americanism is all about.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you would like people to know about you, your campaign, or the office you're seeking?
Sure. I believe that the people of House District 18 have the same value structure that I have. And, we care about our country. We care about our communities. We care that, this is a wonderful place for us to work and to raise our family and to worship. And so I believe that I possess those values as well. And so I want to make sure that we have a true conservative representing House District 18, someone that is going to work to secure the border, work to secure our communities, work to secure our elections with the election integrity bill, working to make sure that those values are what we have represented, and that we have a representative that will be with us. I'm one of us. I have grown up in this area, done grassroots work all my life, and especially in the last 20 years where I've really dug in with our conservative Republican values. And so people are going to see me. They're going to know that I'm in the district. They're going to know that they can call me and that I'm going to get back to them. And I don't think that's what House District 18 has right now. And so I am not that kind of a person. I am a one that is a hands-on person. And I've always been that way. And so if that's what you like in a state representative, then I'm your girl, and I'm ready to go to work in Austin.
All right. Thank you very much, Janice, for your time today.
Thank you so much. Anytime. Have a great day.
You too.